Well, welcome to all you guys joining us today, whether you're joining us online or at our campuses at Northgate and at Madras. We're glad you're here. We're in week 2 of a series that's all about how to make good decisions. And that's cool because whether you're a Christian or not, everybody needs to learn how to make good decisions. Because the truth is, and you know this is true, your life is made up of just a series of decisions that you've made all throughout the time you've been alive. And we said last week there's a great book in the Bible that deals with this whole topic of decision making. It's called the Book of Proverbs. And that's the book we're going to be looking at for the next few weeks. In fact, if you're here today and you wouldn't even consider yourself a Christian, it's a great thing that you're here because the Book of Proverbs is for you. You don't even have to believe in God. You don't have to believe that the stuff in the Bible is true. Maybe you're a person who says, I'm not sure I buy into the Bible and what it says. The Proverbs is a great book for you to read because it's just a collection of stuff that's common sense. And I think whether you believe the Bible or God or anything like that, you'll agree with the Book of Proverbs. It just makes sense. And we've been reading this book together, and we encourage you to do the same because it's just so practical. It'll be helpful to you regardless of what you believe. But here's the thing, and if you've already started reading along with us in Proverbs, you've already probably noticed this. Proverbs separates people into 2 categories. It's sort of a general theme of the whole book. It says that essentially you got 2 kinds of people in this world. On one hand, there are people that are really wise, and then there are people who are foolish. And in pretty much every decision point in your life, every decision that you make, you'll find that there's a wise choice, and then there's a choice that's not so wise. And the Bible calls that a foolish choice. And how you choose between those 2, well, that determines what kind of life you wind up building. Now, here's what we're going to do for the rest of the series. We're going to take a look at life and divide it up into different categories, different segments, if you will, and we're going to try and figure out what does wisdom look like in each of these areas of life. And that's how the rest of the series is going to go. But for today, it's going to be a little different. For today, we're going to back up a little, and we're going to look at it differently. We're going to look at not necessarily life in segments. We're going to look at life at its root, life at the very core of where you live. In other words, before you can ever get to talk about how to make a wise choice or a foolish choice, you first have to ask this question. Where do wise choices come from? Where does a foolish choice come from? How does that happen in my life? Where does that all come from? And the answer to that question is really found in this short little story that Jesus told, and it's recorded in your Bible. And here's why this story is so important to us and what we're talking about. Because just like the book of Proverbs does, Jesus does the same thing. Jesus divides people into wise and foolish. He divides choices into wise and foolish. And he does it by pointing towards the root cause of what happens when you make a wise or a foolish choice. If you want to follow along, it's in the book of Matthew in the New Testament. It's in chapter 7, starting with verse 24. We'll put it up on the screen for you. Jesus tells a story like this. He says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice, well, he's like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice, he's like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Now, I said Jesus tells a story. Actually, what he does is he really tells 2 stories, and he puts them back to each other. And the reason he does that is he has a purpose. He wants his listeners to compare the 2 stories. He wants it's a deliberate method of storytelling that he's using. And basically, if you can take those 2 stories, place them side by side, you'll find the meaning in the story when you compare what's the same and what's different. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take these 2 stories Jesus told, put them side by side. We're going to compare. How are they different? How are they the same? Well, let's start by looking at how they're the same. First thing you'll notice when Jesus tells a story is both of these guys build a house. And Jesus is making this point. It doesn't matter if you're a wise person or a foolish person. Everybody builds a house. And naturally, the house in this story represents your life. So the point is this. We're all building a life. You're building one, I'm building one. And regardless of how well you build it, you're building one. You don't really get a choice in that. Now, I want to give you a picture of this, and I brought something to show you. So this is the picture I want to show you. How many of you have ever seen a game like this. This is a game that you might have played as a kid. It's called Jenga. And if you don't know Jenga, it's basically you stack up these little blocks and you make a tower out of it. And the rules of the game go like this. Each person goes around and you remove a block. So you'll remove a block and put it on top. And then somebody else's turn, and they'll pull one of these out. And you just keep going like that and putting the blocks on top. And you keep removing them until finally the thing just crashes to the ground. And Jenga it has all kinds of great life lessons in it. For instance, if you play Jenga and you relate it to real life, you know, it tells you that there really are no winners, that there is only a loser, because that's how the game is played. Somebody loses and then everybody stands around and laughs at them, I guess. I don't know, but there's no winner to the game. So in a lot of ways, Jenga is just like life. But that's how that goes. Now, what's the point of that? Well, basically it's this. Your life and my life is essentially a tower we've built made up of little building blocks. And the building blocks of your life are the decisions that you've made every single day of your life for years and years and years over time. The more decisions you make, the more of a life you build. And here's what wise people understand. Wise people understand that every decision or every little block matters. Now, does every decision topple your life? No, not necessarily. But wise people understand that they have an effect on the structure of your life. I mean, everybody who's wise understands your decisions have consequences. And sometimes they affect the whole deal. Sometimes they have just a small effect on it. It doesn't necessarily wreck your whole life every time. But every decision comes with a consequence, and you didn't get to choose what that consequence was. I'll show you examples of this out of the book of Proverbs. Proverbs says it this way. It says, if you set a trap for other people, you'll probably get caught in that trap yourself. If you roll a boulder down on other people, it'll crush you instead. In other words, the writer's saying here, the choices you make, be careful, because they could come back to hurt you. In another place, the writer says, can a man scoop a flame into his lap and not have his clothes catch on fire? Can he walk on hot coals and not blister his feet? And again, he's just making the point. Be careful what kind of decisions you make, because every decision comes with a consequence. So the first thing we need to understand out of Jesus' story is this. Everybody's building a life, and every life is built on the choices that you make, the choices that I make. And every choice comes with a consequence, and you don't get to decide what the consequence is. Now, did you notice what other part of the story was the same? Well, in both of Jesus' stories, there was a storm. And the storm hit both houses just the same. And here's all Jesus is trying to say with that. He says, look, it doesn't matter what kind of house you decide to build. It doesn't matter what kind of builder you are. You could be really good at building a house. But every life goes through a storm. Every life has a storm. And notice what the storm highlights. The storm will always highlight and reveal the kind of house you've built. In other words, Jesus is saying, look, if you want to know what kind of life you built over time, whether you've made foolish choices or whether you've made wise choices, you're probably not ever going to know that until a storm comes. See, here's the thing. When you make a choice in your day-to-day life, you make choices all the time. But whenever you make a choice, sometimes you don't know if it's the right thing. You don't know if it's wise. You don't know if it's foolish. Not right away. But at some point you will. Because something's going to happen sometime in your life. And when it does, the condition of your life will be seen for what it really is. And when that day comes, you'll stop and you'll look around and you'll say, wow, how did I wind up here? And it could be a good place you wind up in. It could be a bad place you wind up in. But when you finally stop and you consider that question, how did I end up here? What you're going to find is, oh, this traces back to a decision that I made. This all came about because of a moment that I had. And you didn't realize it at the time. You probably weren't even sure if it was the wise call or the foolish call at the time. But now you know. Now there's something else you need to notice in Jesus' story, and it's this. That foolish guy who built that house and it toppled, Jesus doesn't call him a bad guy. In fact, Jesus kind of makes a point. He's not evil. I mean, he didn't really do this on purpose. In fact, you read the story, Jesus never criticizes him for being bad or evil or having bad motives. All Jesus says, the only commentary he has on this guy is, he's just foolish. The point is, just because a storm in your life reveals that you've made a bad choice, it doesn't automatically mean you're an evil person. Now, when I think about this whole thing, it reminds me of a time when I was in high school. I had a friend of mine who he was a little bit older than me, and he had gone off to college, and we stayed in touch though, and he went off to college and wound up meeting this girl, and he decided to get married, and so he actually he was off in the Air Force at the time, and they make their wedding plans, and the plan is this: he's going to come back home, and he's going to get me, and he's got another friend with him, and we're going to drive down to the wedding. The wedding was in Daytona Beach, Florida. And so, I was in high school, and my friend who's a little bit older than me says, hey, road trip, and I'm thinking, well, anything without my parents involved is cool at that time, so I was all in. So we're going to go on this road trip, and we're going to drive down to Daytona Beach for this wedding of his, and it's just me, him, and this other friend of his. Now, this other friend that he's got, he's met him in the Air Force. This guy, he's from the Northwest. He's never been in Georgia his whole life. And so he brings his buddy down, and here's what you need to understand. If you're geographically challenged, Daytona Beach, Florida is on the east coast of Florida, right? It's on the Atlantic. So to get to there from here, you've got to go down I-75 through South Georgia, hit I-10, and go east, right? So the three of us, we load up in his car, and it's some insane hour of the night, like 3 or 4 in the morning, and we hop in this car, and of course, I immediately jump in the back seat. I'm going to sleep because it's early. So I go to sleep in the back seat. So it's me in the back seat asleep. It's my friend who hasn't lived in Georgia in years, and his friend who's been in Georgia for about 24 hours. You can probably see where this is going. So about 2 or 3 hours into the trip, I wake up, and it's starting to get daylight now, and I sit up in the back seat, and I start looking around, and I'm groggy, and I don't know where I'm at. It looks like every other stretch of highway you've ever seen on the interstate, but I notice as we pass a sign, there's one of those state symbols on it, and the state looks a lot like the shape of the state of Alabama. But I thought to myself, well, I'm groggy, maybe I just misread that, so I'll just keep looking. So I'm looking for signs to tell me where I am. Pretty soon I see a sign that lets me know, yes indeed, we are about 30 miles outside of Montgomery, Alabama. My friend did not know the difference between I-85 and I-75. So as you can imagine, a trip to Daytona Beach that should have taken us about 8 hours winds up being about 12 or 13, and so we give my friend all kinds of heck about that every time he comes home. In fact, I was one of the groomsmen in his wedding. I decorated his car. We put which way to Montgomery all over his car. It was hilarious. It was great. But anyway, the point is this. That was a foolish choice. But nobody intended that. Nobody set out to make that foolish choice on purpose. And that's the way it is in your life. It just happens sometimes. It's like you pick a highway and you're riding down it. You think you're on the right road, and then finally some really smart guy in the back seat sits up and says, hey, you're on the wrong road. It just happens that way, right? Now, that's just the way it is. So those are the two similarities in Jesus' story. But let's look at some of the differences, right? Well, the first thing you'll find difference in these stories is, first of all, of course, it's the foundation of the house. One, Jesus says, is built on the rock. The other is built on sand. And it was that distinction that Jesus says makes all the difference in the world. It made the difference between whether the house stood or fell, whether the life was a good one or whether it crashed. Again, for the purposes of his story, Jesus just wants us to understand these are two identical houses, really. I mean, you think of it this way. Both houses have the same kind of framework. They've probably got the same attention to details. Somebody really put time into it. They were both attractive. They had everything that you would need to build a good house and live in it and be comfortable. But the guy who built the house on the sand, well, he probably spent as much time as the other guy building his house. There's one difference. The problem is he didn't spend any time on the details. He never thought to spend enough time looking at the foundation. And I think that's one of the reasons people end up building lives that don't stand up when hard times come or when a storm hits your life, whatever it looks like. It's because you and I, and this is true of all of us, we spend so much time on what's right in front of us. The immediate concerns of your everyday, the urgent tasks that life throws at you, and you end up spending so much time on that stuff that you don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about, well, what's underneath my life? What's the foundation of my life? And see, my point on saying all that is, it all comes down to what you're focused on. It really all comes down to focus. In fact, I'll give an example of this. This will be fun. A few years ago, an experiment was done, and they did it on two groups of, or on several groups of people, and they wanted to see how well can these people focus on a given task and stay focused on the task. And so I thought it'd be fun for us to try this, so you'll kind of get the idea of how we can get so focused on things. And I want us to try it out and see how well we do. So again, hopefully this will be fun for you. Here's what's going to happen. In just a moment, you're going to see a video come on the screen, okay? And in this video, here's what you're going to see. It's a video of two teams of people passing a basketball back and forth, okay? And you'll notice there's one team that's wearing white shirts and another team wearing black shirts. Here's your assignment, okay? It's going to take some focus. You're going to have to count how many times the white team passes the ball, okay? So focus on the white team, and you just start counting how many times the white team passes the ball. And don't count out loud, because that's not only annoying, it's distracting to the people around you, so don't count out loud. But you just watch the video, count how many times the white team passes the ball. And then after it's over, I'll tell you the answer, and we'll see if you got it right. So everybody get ready. Here it comes. We're going to put it on the screen. Here it goes. All right, there they are, and we're rolling the video. Start counting. All right. Now, just for fun, I want you to turn to somebody that's sitting near you and just tell them how many you think it is. Just tell them your number real quick so you can be accountable, okay? All right, the correct answer is 16, okay? 16 passes. Now, raise your hand, how many of you got that right? All right, good for you. Those of you who got 16, we're real proud of you. Now, before we move on, I got a few questions I need to ask you real quickly. Here's the question. How many of you actually saw the gorilla in the video? Raise your hands. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You don't even know what I'm talking about, because here's the truth. The research on this little experiment shows that only about half the people sitting in the room right now actually noticed that there was a gorilla that walked across the video. Now, the rest of you probably think I'm lying about the gorilla, so just to prove it to you, we're going to bring this video back up on the screen. It's the same video, and this time I want you to watch for the gorilla. So let's roll it. So see, before you were focused on the white team, and you were counting how many times they were throwing the ball. And about half of you probably didn't notice the moment right about here. And you'll see the gorilla comes in, there he beats his chest, and he walks out of the frame. Exact same video. Now, here's the question. Why did you see the gorilla the second time? Well, because this time you were looking for it. Now, some of you may have seen it before, and that's great. You've got some incredible focus. But let me blow some of your minds even more. How many of you noticed that the curtain changed colors? And how many of you noticed that one of the members of the black team just actually bailed? They walked off the video. Now, see, that blew some of your minds right there. If you don't believe me, go to Google. You can look at it again. You can have fun with your friends. Just Google the invisible gorilla test, and it's all there. So that was fun, but what's the point? Well, here's the idea. Your life is all about what you focus on, what you choose to give attention to. And see, so many of us get focused on the task at hand, what's right in front of us, the immediate daily kinds of things that we have to do, the things that demand your time, the things that pull your focus, and you have to do them, that you sometimes end up totally missing the gorilla-sized foundational issues of your life. It's like a lot of us go through life and we're building this huge, elaborate house, right? But we never take the time to check and see what's underneath it. Is there even something underneath my life that's worth me building on? Let me give you some examples of how this works. Here's an example. There's a couple, and they spend every single day getting up, going to work, paying the bills, driving the kids to and from the places they need to go, which are all good things, and we all ought to do them. But then you fast forward 20 years later, the kids are out of the house, life starts slowing down quite a bit, and they stop and look around at their life and they go, wait a minute, nobody's ever worked on this marriage, or at least not for a long, long time. And they realize that the foundation of their relationship is damaged and nobody even knew it. And sometimes it's even beyond repair. You bring home a paycheck at the end of the week, right? And the moment it hits your checking account, what happens? It starts going back out to all the places you need it to go. Bills, shopping, groceries, presents, mortgages, cars. Again, all good things. We all got to take care of those, right? Until one day you look back at years and years of hard work and you realize, I don't have anything to show for it now. I don't have anything to show for it in the future. I don't have anything invested in the things that I love, God's purposes in the world, the things that I want to see done in this world. And it's because the urgent things of your everyday life pull at your financial life until you don't have anything to show for what's going on now or even in the future, and you're not very proud of what you see. I've seen parents spend every single day giving their kids every advantage that they never had. Get them in the right school, get them in the right sports, the right travel team, the right extracurriculars. We got to get them to the best college they can get to, get the scholarships they need. Again, there's nothing wrong with these things until a parent wakes up later in their kid's life and realizes, wait a minute, my kid has no relationship with the God who loves them. My kid has no relationship with the body of Christ, the church, his local expression in this world, and now they wonder, why is my kid so directionless? Why is my kid so apathetic? Why is my kid so angry or whatever? And it's because you built a really, really good house, but there's nothing underneath. Because nobody ever took the time to fight against the pull of the right here, the right now, the urgent. And nobody looked beneath the surface and found out, is there anything foundational here? Is there anything that is even important undergirding my life? That's why Jesus points out the second difference in those houses in his story. Jesus says they had different foundations, and because of that, they ended up in completely different conditions. One stands, even though the storm hits. The other one falls flat in the same storm. Jesus is just trying to get us to see that it is the foundation of your life that drives you to make the choices that you make. And when your foundation is bad, or when it goes unnoticed, or when it goes unattended, it causes this ripple effect, and it affects the decisions that you make every single day, and it causes you to do things that seem right at the time, that feel urgent at the time, that just the decisions that just have to be made. And those decisions, they don't come from a deeper place. They don't come from wisdom. They don't come from a commitment to the God who loves you. They come out of emotion. They come out of pressure. They come out of influences that are all around you. You guys know this little story, but there's a little town in Italy, and they've got a tower, and that tower is famous, but not because of what the tower was built, what was made into the tower. The fact that it's famous is because it's so poorly built, because it doesn't even stand straight on its foundation. You probably heard of it. It's known as the Leaning Tower of Pisa. In fact, we've got a picture of it for you. And you look at it, and the architecture of this tower, it's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it's a beautiful thing. The walls are thick. They're sturdy. In fact, the walls are 13 feet thick. It's literally a work of art. But the problem isn't how it was built. The problem is where it was built. If you don't know the story, do you know what the literal meaning of the word Pisa means? It means marshy land. So here's the scenario. Some guy comes walking into a town called Marshy Land and says, I'm going to build a tower 186 feet in the air. And I'm going to build the foundation. Guess how many feet? 10 feet. That's how deep the foundation of that tower is. In fact, they've actually gone in and had to put supports underneath it. It's sturdy now. They've got it to where it won't move. But at the time they did that, it was moving about 1/20th of an inch every single year, and it was headed down. In fact, right now, when they've stopped it, it's about 15 feet off of vertical. And the thing is, nobody ever set out and said, I want to build a tower that's actually going to fall over years down the road. But at the same time, nobody was ever wise enough to slow down and take a look around them and figure out, what do I need to put underneath this thing to keep it standing up straight? And you see, this is why foundation building is so hard. It's so hard for you, and it's hard for me too. Foundation building, it's not fun. It's not glamorous. It's not the thing that people notice or talk about. Because, see, nobody cares about your foundation of your life. I mean, nobody pays attention to your foundation. I mean, think about it this way. Has anybody ever walked inside of your house and just started commenting on the foundation? Wow, this is the greatest foundation of a house. Nobody says that. But what do they say when they walk into your house? They comment on the furniture, the appliances, the paint, the decorations. All of that stuff they care about. Nobody ever cares about your foundation. It's the same way with your life. Nobody knows about your foundation except for you and God. And the truth is, most of the time, nobody even cares about what you're building your life on except for you and God. But Jesus said one day they'll know. See, one day a storm's coming to your life, storm's coming to my life, storm comes to every life. And who knows what it's going to be. It's something that'll show your foundation for what it really is. And then when that moment comes, it will be visibly apparent to everybody, including you, what your foundation was. And Jesus is just calling us, just like the book of Proverbs, over and over. Seek wisdom, because wisdom will lead you to build a life on a solid foundation. And you have the choice. You get to decide, am I going to rely on the wisdom that I come up with, what I think is right, what I can figure out on my own, or am I going to build a life on a foundation that comes from somebody that's way smarter than me? I said this already, but over the next few weeks, we're going to break your life down and my life, and we're going to talk about all kinds of things. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about your words, how we speak. We're going to talk about anger, discipline, and how do we put wisdom into all of those areas of our lives. And see, even when I said that stuff, a lot of you are looking really forward to that. You're thinking to yourself, man, I really need wisdom in that. I can't wait for that message. But my point is this. What we have to see first is if you decide to run toward any kind of decision and look for the wise choice in any of those areas, and you don't start with the foundation, it doesn't matter what you decide, because you think you've gotten wisdom for all these other areas, but in reality what you're doing is you're making decisions built on a completely faulty foundation. You're making decisions based on all these peripheral issues, not the foundational issues. Because here's what most of us forget when we think about our lives. We forget every choice you make is a spiritual choice. See, most people look at their life and they think, well, my life, it's broken up into two segments. You know, I've got my spiritual life, and it's over here, and that's how I do God, and that's how I do religion and church and all that stuff, and that's my spiritual life. But over here, I've got my real life, and that's how I do work and school and marriage and relationships and how I raise my kids. That's my real life. My spiritual life is over here. And see, most people don't understand that what you believe about God, how you decide to interact with Him and the church and that part of your life, that whole spiritual side of your life, that has everything to do with all the other stuff in your life. Most people can't see that what you believe about God, the relationship you have with God, how you put His Word into practice, will affect every other part of your life. It'll affect every decision about everything you do. Spiritual life defined by Jesus, that thing that creates a foundation on the rock versus putting a foundation on sand, is found in one simple phrase. Jesus said it in the story. We're going to put that back on the screen. I want to read it to you again. This time I want to highlight it for you so that you'll see it. Look at what Jesus said. Jesus says, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like that wise man. And in the other story, everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't put them into practice, that's the foolish man. So do you see what separates people who make wise decisions from people who make foolish decisions? Jesus says it just comes down to whether or not you decide to take His teachings, what He says about life, and put them to practice. It's taking God at His word and making decisions in your life based on what He says. and choosing that his wisdom is better than your own. Now, I know what some of you are already thinking. Some of you are here and you're not a Christian, and you're just checking Christianity out, and you're thinking to yourself, see, this is why I can't do this Jesus thing. It's because every time I get close, somebody like you stands up and says, I got to take every decision in my life, and I got to hand it all over to Jesus. It's an all or nothing thing. And you're thinking, I like some of the things, and I'm sure about those, but then there's some that I'm not so sure about, and I'm not ready to just do all or nothing. So how does that work? And I get that. Look, I think today is going to be good news for you when you hear it, because here's how I want you to think about your life. Think about all the decisions that you have, your life, and think of it as if it were just a clean, crisp $100 bill that you have in your pocket, right? See, some people think that when God comes along, he says, all right, I want your life. Give me the whole $100 bill right here, right now, no questions, just hand it all over. Now, you just need to know, if you're not a Christian yet, some of us who are, we've come to the place where we trust Jesus so much, and we think Jesus is so right about everything that that's okay with us. We've decided, you know what? Jesus is right, and so I'm going to hand every decision off to him, and I'm giving him the whole 100, right? And that's just the way we decide to live. But I know that takes a lot of trust, and you may not be there right now. And the truth is, it took us a long time to get there too, and we don't do that perfectly every day either. But here's the good news: if you're a skeptic today, and you're not sure if you can trust Jesus completely, yes, God wants every one of those decisions. He wants the whole $100 bill. But the cool thing about God is that he loves you so much that he has given you a life broken up into dimes and quarters and nickels. And you deciding you want to make decisions his way doesn't mean you have to hand it all over at one time. God loves you so much that he entrusts you with a decision every moment of every day. And he says, hey, come on, will you give me this one? And you get to decide. When the time comes, he'll give you that choice. Are you going to hand this little decision over to God and give it to him and allow him to make it for you and trust that what he says is right, or are you going to hang on to it and do your own thing? In fact, that's my challenge for you this week. Every single week we take next steps around here. So I'm going to call your attention to your connection card. It was on your seat when you came in. And you'll see on the back of it, there's a next step there that says this. It says, I'm going to make decisions this week based on what Jesus would do and not based on what I would do. Now, here's how you do that. You just make a commitment. Every decision that you have to make this week, before you have to make it, you just stop, slow it down, and ask this question. If Jesus made this decision for me right now, if he got to make this decision, what would he do? And the challenge is, even if it's not what you would do in that moment, you just trust him enough to say, okay, I'll give you this decision, and you just, whatever you think Jesus would say, whatever you think he would do, you just do it. And if you want to take that challenge, we just ask you every week, just check that box and let us know it. Turn that card in when the offering comes around, and we'll pray for you, and we'll encourage you. It's just a commitment between you and God, but it's a physical way for you to make this commitment to him. Now, you may say, well, that's too much for me. I get that. That's okay. There's other steps on there you can take. You can just start reading the book of Proverbs with us. That's on there. You can do that. I'll remind you of the one right there that says, we're ramping up to a big day here at CCC, October 26th. We've asked you to invite your friends who aren't connected to church to be here on that day, because on that day we're going to provide 5 years of clean drinking water to a person in Haiti for every person who attends CCC that day. We're just doing this outreach thing. We want to invite everybody to come and be a part of it, and it's just an easy invitation that you can make to your friends for them to come and see what God is doing here and allow them to be a part of it. We encourage you to make those invitations between now and then. I want to remind you of that. But whatever next step you're taking this week, just let us know. Tell us on that connection card, and the offering's going to come by at the end today, and you can drop that in. And again, if you're here for the first time, that's really all we're asking you to put in that basket. We don't want anything else from you. In fact, we have a gift for you just for giving us your card today. You can stop by the information table on your way out, grab that free book. It's just a resource we think will be helpful to you. We're so glad you're here today, being a part of this, and we hope you'll come back next week. But before we end, I want to say one last thing. You know why I'm so confident in you taking that challenge to give your decisions every day over to Jesus? You know how I can be so confident and ask you to make decisions based on his wisdom and not your own? Because I know one thing. I know when you start to do that, even if you don't even believe Jesus is God or any of that stuff, you know what you'll find when you start giving your decisions over to him? You're going to find out slowly over time Jesus is right. He's just right. He's right about everything. He's right about your friends. He's right about your marriage, your money, your job, everything. And if you will slowly begin to base your life on a foundation that is Jesus and what he would do if he were living your life, you're going to have a firm foundation, and it won't crumble the next time a storm comes. You'll be able to stand. Now, is it the easiest way for you to live? Absolutely not. But I'm telling you, it's the wise way to live, and it's really the only foundation there is. I hope you'll take the adventure with us. Let's bow for prayer. Father, I pray that we would right now just commit to take this challenge and go on this moment-by-moment adventure with you. And that every decision we make, we would take the risk and we would trust that you're right about everything. And as we do that, God, I pray that more and more we would build a life with a foundation that is on you, placed firmly in you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.